The Cathari observation vessel drifted silently above the frozen wasteland that humans called the Arctic. Commander Zylver pressed his three-fingered hand against the viewing panel, his compound eyes struggling to process what the sensors were telling him. Down below, in temperatures that would kill his species in minutes, a human settlement was thriving. "This is impossible," he said, his translator crackling with static. "The surface temperature is negative 47 degrees. Nothing should survive down there." His science officer, a young female named Reshka, moved beside him with her data tablet. "Yet they do, Commander. We have counted 312 humans in that outpost. They have been there for 17 of their years." Zylver's antenna twitched in disbelief. The Cathari came from a warm world, a place of tropical forests and heated oceans. They had evolved to need warmth like other species needed oxygen. The idea of living in such cold was beyond understanding. "Show me everything," he commanded. "I want to know how they do this." Far below, unaware of the alien eyes watching her, Captain Alina Volkov walked through the main corridor of Outpost Borealis. Her boots made soft sounds on the heated floor panels as she moved. Around her, the station hummed with life. Generators pumped warm air through every room. Lights glowed bright against the endless winter darkness outside. Alina had lived in the Arctic for 6 years now. She remembered her first winter, the terror she had felt when the sun disappeared for months. The cold had seemed like a living thing, pressing against the walls, trying to get inside. But she had learned to respect the cold rather than fear it. She had learned that humans were stronger than the ice. "Captain," called out a voice behind her. She turned to see Marcus Webb, her chief engineer, jogging to catch up. His breath made small clouds in the air despite the heating systems. "We have a problem with Generator 4. The wind last night damaged the exhaust vent." Alina nodded calmly. Problems were common in the Arctic. The trick was to stay calm and solve them one at a time. "How long until we lose heat in the East Wing?" 4 hours, maybe 5 if we get lucky." "Then we better not waste time hopping for luck. Get your team ready. I will meet you at the generator in 10 minutes." Marcus hurried off, and Alina continued her walk. She passed the mess hall where workers sat eating breakfast, their conversations filling the air with warmth. She passed the medical bay where Dr. Sasha Petrov was checking on a patient with frostbite from yesterday's supply run. She passed the recreation room where off-duty workers played cards and watched old movies on screens. All of this existed because humans refused to give up. When the first explorers came to the Arctic, everyone thought they were crazy. The ice was too cold, the darkness too complete, the storms too powerful. But humans came anyway. They built shelters that the wind could not knock down. They made clothes that kept their bodies warm. They invented machines that turned the endless ice into drinkable water. And slowly, over generations, they turned the frozen wasteland into a home. Above the planet, Zylver watched footage of the human settlement. His science officer had deployed microscopic drones to observe without being detected. The images they sent back were remarkable. "Look at this," Reshka said, pointing to her screen. "They are going outside in this temperature." The footage showed a group of humans putting on heavy suits. Layer after layer of fabric covered their bodies until they looked twice their normal size. Masks went over their faces, protecting their lungs from the frozen air. Goggles covered their eyes. Within minutes, they had transformed themselves into creatures that could survive the cold. "The suits are fascinating," Reshka continued. "Multiple layers of insulation, heat-generating elements powered by small batteries, reflective material to keep body warmth from escaping. They have essentially built personal climate systems." Zylver watched the suited humans walk out into the blizzard. Snow and wind hit them hard enough to knock over a Cathari, but the humans just leaned into it and kept moving. They walked toward a large machine that was half buried in snow and began digging it out with tools. "Why are they doing this?" Zylver asked. Why live in such a terrible place? Reshka consulted her research files. The Arctic contains many valuable resources: minerals, metals, frozen water that is extremely pure. The humans extract these things and trade them with warmer regions, but there is more to it than that. What do you mean? I have been studying their communications. Many of these humans chose to come here. They speak of the Arctic with affection. They call it beautiful. They say they feel more alive here than anywhere else. Zylver's antenna flattened in confusion. Beautiful. It is a frozen death trap. To us, yes, but the humans see something different. They see challenge. They see opportunity. They see a place where they can prove themselves strong. Down at Outpost Borealis, Alina reached Generator 4. Marcus and his team were already there, studying the damage. The exhaust vent had been torn partially away by last night's winds, allowing snow to get inside the machinery. Ice was forming on components that needed to stay clear. Options? Alina asked. Marcus rubbed his bearded chin. We can try to repair the vent from inside, but it will not hold long. Someone needs to go outside and weld a new panel over the damaged section. In this weather? I know, Captain, but if we do not, we lose heat in the east wing. That is where the children's quarters are. Alina looked at the damaged vent, then at the small window showing the storm outside. The wind was screaming at over 80 kilometers per hour. The temperature had dropped even lower overnight. Going outside in these conditions was extremely dangerous. But the children needed heat. The families in the East Wing were counting on them. I will do it, Alina said. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but Alina raised her hand. I have the most experience in extreme conditions. Get me a welding kit and the repair panel. I will be ready in 15 minutes. As she walked to the equipment room, Alina thought about why she was doing this. She could have stayed in Moscow, where winters were cold but manageable. She could have taken a desk job somewhere warm. Instead, she had come to the end of the world to live on ice. Her father had been an Arctic explorer. He had told her stories of the ice since she was a little girl. Stories of challenge and triumph. Stories of humans pushing past every limit nature put in front of them. When he died on an expedition when she was 12, Alina had promised herself she would continue his work. The Arctic had taken her father, but it had also given her purpose. She pulled on her survival suit piece by piece. Thermal undergarments first, then insulating layers, then the outer shell designed to stop the wind. Her hands moved with practiced speed. She had done this hundreds of times. When she was fully suited, she looked like a creature from another world, which, in a way, she was. Humans had not evolved for the Arctic. They had evolved for the warm savannas of Africa, where the sun was hot and food was plentiful. But unlike other creatures, humans did not let their evolution limit them. They built tools and clothes and shelters that let them live anywhere. Alina picked up the welding kit and the repair panel. She walked to the exit airlock where Marcus was waiting. Be careful out there, he said. Alina nodded and sealed her helmet. The inner door closed behind her. She waited for the pressure to equalize, then opened the outer door. The cold hit her like a physical force. Even through all her layers, she could feel it trying to reach her skin. The wind pushed against her, testing her balance. Snow filled the air so thickly that she could barely see 3 meters ahead. But Alina had trained for this. She had spent years learning to move in these conditions. She stepped out into the blizzard and began walking toward the damaged vent. Above the planet, Zylver watched the small figure struggle through the storm. His compound eyes widened in amazement. She is actually doing it, he said. She is walking into that storm on purpose. Reshka recorded everything, her instruments capturing every detail of the human struggle. Her body temperature is dropping, she reported. Her heart rate is increasing. Her body is under enormous stress. Will she survive? Reshka hesitated. I do not know. No Cathari has ever attempted anything like this. We have no data to compare." They watched as Alina reached the damaged vent. She secured herself against the wind with a cable attached to her suit. Then, with fingers that must have been numb despite her gloves, she began the repair work. The welding torch flared bright against the white snow, a tiny point of heat in the frozen darkness. The repair took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of standing in the killing cold, of fighting the wind, of forcing her body to keep moving when every instinct told her to stop. When it was done, Alina walked back to the airlock on legs that were shaking with exhaustion. Inside, Marcus helped her remove her suit. Her face was pale, her lips slightly blue despite the protection, but she was smiling. "Generator 4 is fixed," she said. "The children will stay warm tonight." Marcus shook his head in wonder. "You are crazy, Captain, completely crazy." "Maybe," Alina agreed, "but I am still here, and so are all of you." That, in the end, was what made humans remarkable. They survived things that should kill them. They kept going when giving up would be easier. They turned the frozen wasteland into a home because they refused to accept that anywhere was too harsh for human life. In his observation vessel, Zylver began to understand why his commanders had ordered this mission. The Cathari had encountered many species in the galaxy. Some were smarter than humans. Some were stronger. Some had better technology or more resources. But none of them had this stubborn refusal to die, this ability to take any environment, no matter how deadly, and bend it to their will. The humans had not conquered the Arctic through superior biology or advanced weapons. They had conquered it through pure endurance, through refusing to give up, no matter what the ice threw at them. And that, Zylver realized, was what made them dangerous. The storm continued to rage outside Outpost Borealis. The wind screamed and the snow fell and the darkness pressed against the walls. But inside, the humans were warm. Inside, they were safe. And tomorrow, they would go outside and face the ice again. Because that was what humans did. 3 days after the generator repair, the storm finally broke. Alina stood at the observation window of Outpost Borealis and watched the sky clear for the first time in a week. The sun was just a faint glow on the horizon, barely visible during the Arctic winter, but it was enough to paint the ice fields in shades of pink and gold. Behind her, the outpost was buzzing with activity. The break in the weather meant supply runs could resume. Teams were preparing vehicles and checking equipment. The brief window of calm had to be used wisely. "Captain Volkov," called a voice over the intercom. "You are needed in the communications room." Alina walked through the corridors, nodding to workers as she passed. The outpost had grown over the years from a simple research station to a small town. There were families here now, children who had been born on the ice and knew no other home. The Arctic that had once been a hostile frontier was becoming something else entirely. The communications room was a small space filled with screens and equipment. Lieutenant Pavel Orlov sat at the main console, his young face creased with confusion. "What is it?" Alina asked. Pavel pointed at his screen. "We are receiving a strange signal, Captain. It is not coming from any of our usual contacts. In fact," he hesitated, "I am not sure it is coming from Earth at all." Alina leaned closer, looking at the data streaming across the screen. The signal was unlike anything she had seen before. It pulsed in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost like a language. "When did this start?" "About an hour ago. At first, I thought it was interference from the storm remnants, but the pattern is too regular. Someone or something is sending this on purpose." Alina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. For as long as she could remember, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now, standing in the Arctic communication room, she might be looking at the answer. "Can you trace the source?" Pavel worked at his console for several minutes. When he looked up, his face was pale. The signal is coming from directly above us, about 200 kilometers up. 200 kilometers. That was well within Earth's orbital space. But there were no satellites in that position, no space stations, nothing that should be sending signals. "Something is up there," Alina said quietly, "and it is watching us." Above the ice fields, Zylver had made a decision. His species had strict rules about first contact with less advanced civilizations. They were supposed to observe only, never to interact. But after watching Alina repair the generator in the deadly storm, something had changed in his thinking. "You want to do what?" Rishka asked, her antenna twitching with alarm. "I want to make contact," Zylver repeated. "I want to speak with these humans directly." "Commander, that is against every protocol, if the High Council finds out." "The High Council sent us here to evaluate humanity, to determine if they are ready for wider galactic contact." Zylver turned to face his science officer. "I have watched them for 3 standard cycles now. I have seen enough." "And what have you seen?" Zylver paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have seen a species that refuses to accept limits. They have no natural weapons, no protective shells, no ability to survive cold or heat, yet they live everywhere on their planet. They have made homes in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. They walk into storms that would kill us and come back alive. That does not mean they are ready for first contact." "No, but it means they will not be frightened by it. Any species that can face the Arctic will not run from the stars." Zylver returned to his console and began inputting commands. The observation vessel's communication systems were far more advanced than anything humans possessed, but he adjusted the signal to match their primitive technology. "I am sending a simple mathematical pattern," he explained. "Prime numbers in sequence. If they are intelligent enough to recognize it, they will respond." Reshka watched her commander with a mixture of admiration and worry. He was risking his career, possibly his freedom, but she understood his reasoning. The humans had impressed her too. "What happens if they respond with hostility?" she asked. "Then we leave. We are faster than anything they have, but I do not think they will be hostile." Zylver's compound eyes reflected the blue glow of his screen. "I think they will be curious. That is another thing I have learned about humans. They always want to know more." Down at the outpost, Pavel's screen suddenly filled with new data. His eyes went wide. "Captain, the signal has changed. It is sending prime numbers in sequence." Alina felt her heart racing. Prime numbers were the universal language of intelligence. No natural phenomenon produced them in sequence. Someone was definitely trying to communicate. "Can we respond?" "I think so. Our equipment is basic, but if they can detect our signals at all, they can probably understand them." Alina thought for a long moment. This was the most important decision she would ever make. She was not a diplomat or a scientist. She was a soldier, a survivor, a woman who had spent her life fighting the cold. But right now, she was also humanity's voice. "Send back the next prime in the sequence," she ordered. "Then wait for their response." Pavel's fingers moved over his console. The signal went out, a simple pulse of data carrying a single number into the sky. In the observation vessel, Zylver received the response almost instantly. He felt something he could only describe as relief. The humans had understood. They had answered. "Prepare a translation matrix," he told Rishka. "I want to try actual communication." Over the next several hours, a strange conversation took place between the sky and the ice. Simple numbers gave way to more complex patterns. Patterns became symbols. Symbols became words. It was slow and difficult, but progress was being made. Alina called an emergency meeting of the outpost's senior staff. They gathered in the main conference room, 15 men and women who represented humanity's presence in the Arctic. Alina explained the situation as calmly as she could. "Let me understand this," said Dr. Petrov. rubbing his tired eyes. "You are telling us that aliens are orbiting above our heads and you have been talking to them." "That is correct. And you did not think to contact anyone else? The military, the government?" Alina shook her head. "The signal came to us. Maybe that was intentional, maybe it was random. Either way, we are the ones who have to deal with it." She looked around the room at her people. "I need to know if anyone objects to continuing this contact." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus spoke up. "Captain, we live in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Every day is a fight for survival. If anyone can handle meeting aliens, it is us." Others nodded in agreement. These were people who had chosen the difficult path, who had come to the ice because they wanted challenge. First contact with an alien species was just one more challenge to face. "Then we continue," Alina said. "But carefully. We learn as much as we can before we make any big decisions." The conversation with Zylver progressed slowly. Language was the biggest barrier. Concepts that were simple for one species were completely foreign to another, but both sides were patient, willing to work through the difficulties. By the end of the first day of contact, Alina had learned several important things. The aliens called themselves Cathari. They came from a warm world far across the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for some time, studying humanity from a distance, and they were amazed by what they had seen. "Why are you amazed?" Alina typed into the communication system. "We are not very advanced compared to you." The response came after a translation delay. "Advancement is not only about technology. Your species has survived in conditions that would kill any Cathari. You have shown qualities we consider rare and valuable." "What qualities?" "Persistence, adaptability, the refusal to accept defeat." Alina smiled slightly. Those were the same qualities that had kept her alive in the Arctic for 6 years. It seemed they mattered to aliens too. "Why are you contacting us now?" she asked. "Why not continue watching in secret?" Another delay. Then, "Because we want to understand you better, and because we have a proposal." Alina felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of proposal?" "The Cathari are part of a larger community. Many species across the galaxy have joined together for trade and cooperation. We believe humanity might be ready to join us." The implications hit Alina like a wave of cold air. This was not just first contact. This was an invitation. The Cathari were offering humanity a place among the stars. "I need to think about this," she typed. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "We understand. Take the time you need. We will wait." Alina leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. 24 hours ago, she had been worried about a damaged generator. Now she was considering whether humanity should join a galactic community. Outside the window, the Arctic stretched endlessly in every direction. The ice that had once seemed so vast and important now felt very small. The universe was bigger than Alina had ever imagined. But then again, humans had always found ways to make big things feel smaller. They had crossed oceans that seemed endless. They had climbed mountains that seemed impossible. They had survived the Arctic when everyone said it could not be done. Maybe the stars were just one more challenge to overcome. Alina stood and walked to the window. The sun had set again, plunging the ice fields into darkness. But the outpost was bright with artificial light, a tiny point of warmth in the frozen wasteland. That was what humans did. They created warmth where there was none. They built homes in impossible places. They refused to let the universe tell them where they could and could not go. The Cathari wanted to know if humanity was ready for the stars. Looking out at the Arctic night, Alina thought she knew the answer. They had always been ready. 3 weeks after first contact, Outpost Borealis had transformed into something it had never been designed to be. The small Arctic station was now the unofficial embassy for human-Cathari relations. Diplomats and scientists were flying in from around the world. their fancy clothes completely unsuited for the cold. Alina found it both amusing and frustrating to watch them struggle with the environment she called home. "Another one slipped on the ice this morning," Marcus reported with barely hidden satisfaction. "Some diplomat from Europe. He wanted to walk outside without proper boots." Alina shook her head. "These people have no idea what the Arctic demands. Make sure everyone gets proper cold weather training before they leave the heated areas." "Already done, Captain, though I do not think most of them will last long here anyway." He was probably right. The politicians and officials who had descended on Borealis were used to comfortable offices and heated cars. The constant cold, the darkness, the isolation drove them crazy. Within a week, most were begging to be reassigned somewhere warmer. But the Cathari noticed this too, and it changed how they viewed their new human partners. "We find it interesting," Zylver said during one of their regular communication sessions. He had not yet descended to the surface, but his observation vessel remained in orbit. "The humans who live permanently in this place are very different from the ones who visit temporarily." Alina considered this. Different how? "The visitors complain constantly. They find the cold unbearable and the darkness depressing. They cannot wait to leave." A pause in the transmission. "But you and your people seem almost content here. You have adapted to this environment in ways the visitors have not." "We had to adapt. The Arctic does not care about comfort. It only cares about survival. Either you learn to live here or you die here." This is exactly what we find remarkable. Most intelligent species in the galaxy choose the easiest environments for their settlements, warm places with abundant food and water. Your species is the only one we have observed that deliberately seeks out difficulty. Alina thought about this. She had never considered it strange that humans lived in harsh places. The Arctic, deserts, mountains, deep ocean exploration, humans went everywhere. It was just what they did. "Maybe we like challenges," she offered. "Or maybe we are too stubborn to let any environment beat us." "Perhaps both," Zylver replied. "Either way, it is why we believe you are ready for what we are proposing." The proposal had grown more detailed since first contact. The Cathari were part of something called the Galactic Assembly, a loose alliance of over 200 species from across the galaxy. They did not control their members or force them to obey laws. Instead, they facilitated trade, shared knowledge, and maintained peace through mutual cooperation. But joining the assembly was not simple. Each new species had to prove themselves worthy. They had to show qualities that would benefit the larger community. For most species, this meant demonstrating advanced technology or unique resources. But for humanity, the Cathari wanted something different. "We want you to survive a test," Zylver explained. "A demonstration of the endurance that makes your species unique." Alina felt uneasy. "What kind of test?" "There is a world we call Kryvith. It is one of the harshest environments known to the Assembly. Extreme cold, constant storms, dangerous terrain. Several species have attempted to establish outposts there, but all have failed." "And you want us to try?" "Yes. We want to send a team of humans to Kryvith for one standard year. If they survive and establish a functioning settlement, humanity will be invited to join the Assembly." The proposal spread through human society like wildfire. Some people were excited by the opportunity. Others were terrified. Politicians argued endlessly about whether to accept the challenge. Scientists debated what equipment would be needed. Religious leaders wondered what it meant for humanity's understanding of creation. But at Outpost Borealis, the response was simpler. "I will go," Alina told the assembled officials during a video conference. "I have spent my life preparing for exactly this kind of challenge." "Captain Volkov, this is not your decision to make," said one of the diplomats, a man named Gerald Hammond who wore expensive suits and complained constantly about the cold. "The selection process must be controlled and systematic." Your selection process will take months. The Cathari want an answer within 30 days. We do not have time for politics. Nevertheless, proper procedures must be followed. Alina felt her patience wearing thin. These people had never faced real hardship. They did not understand that sometimes you had to act quickly and decisively, or the opportunity would pass. Let me ask you something, Mr. Hammond. Have you ever been outside in this temperature without proper protection? Have you ever felt the cold try to kill you? Hammond looked uncomfortable. I do not see how that is relevant. It is completely relevant. The test the Cathari are proposing will be the Arctic times 100. Only people who truly understand survival in extreme conditions should be considered for the mission. The argument continued for hours, then days. Alina grew frustrated as politicians debated and committees formed and nothing actually got decided. Meanwhile, the Cathari waited patiently in orbit, watching everything unfold. Zylver contacted Alina privately during the 4th week of debates. Your species is fascinating, he said. You survive the harshest environments through cooperation and determination, but your political systems seem designed to prevent any actual action. Alina laughed despite her frustration. You are not wrong. Sometimes I think we succeed in spite of our leaders, not because of them. Do you still want to participate in the test? More than anything, but they will not let me. There was a long pause. Then Zylver said something unexpected. What if I requested you specifically? Alina blinked. Can you do that? The test is our proposal. We have some say in how it is conducted. I could tell your leaders that we require you specifically, because you have the most experience with extreme cold environments on this planet. They would not like that. Would it matter? The opportunity to join the galactic community is too important for them to refuse over such a small thing. Alina considered this carefully. Going around her own leaders felt wrong, but sitting here while bureaucrats debated felt even worse. The Arctic had taught her that sometimes you had to take action, even if others disagreed. Do it, she said. Request me specifically. The next day, Zylver made the announcement. The Cathari would accept only volunteers from Outpost Borealis for the survival test. They believed that people who had already proven themselves in Earth's harshest conditions would be best prepared for Kryveth. The politicians were outraged, but they could not refuse. The opportunity was too important. Within a week, a team was being assembled entirely from Arctic veterans. Alina would lead the mission, with Marcus as her chief engineer. Dr. Petrov volunteered for medical duties despite being in his 60s. Pavel Orlov signed up to handle communications. Others came forward from across the Arctic research stations, 30 people in total who were willing to risk everything for the chance to prove humanity's worth. You understand what you are volunteering for, Alina told them during the first team meeting. We have no idea what we will face on Kryveth. It will be harder than anything we have experienced here. Some of us might not survive. Marcus spoke up from the back of the room. Captain, we live in a place where a broken generator can kill us. We go outside in storms that can freeze a person solid in minutes. We already live on borrowed time. At least this way, our risks mean something. Others nodded in agreement. These were people who had made peace with danger long ago. They did not fear the unknown. They welcomed it. Alina felt a surge of pride in her team. These were the best humanity had to offer, not because they were the smartest or strongest, but because they were the most determined. They had looked at the Arctic and refused to be beaten. Now they would do the same with an alien world. The Cathari provided transport. A shuttle descended from Zylver's observation vessel, the first alien craft to land on Earth. It touched down on the ice outside Outpost Borealis, its sleek shape looking completely out of place against the frozen landscape. Alina and her team loaded their equipment and said their goodbyes. The politicians gave speeches about historic moments and humanity's destiny. The scientists took readings and measurements of everything. The whole world watched through cameras and satellites. But for Alina, the moment felt strangely simple. She was leaving one harsh environment for another. The details were different, but the challenge was the same. Survive, adapt, refuse to give up. She stepped onto the shuttle and felt the warmth inside. The Cathari had adjusted the temperature for human comfort, but it still felt strange after years in the Arctic cold. Zylver was waiting for her. It was the first time Alina had seen a Cathari in person. He was taller than she expected, with smooth blue skin and compound eyes that reflected the light. His translator device hung around his neck like a pendant. "Welcome aboard, Captain Volkov," he said. "Are you ready?" Alina looked back through the shuttle window at the frozen wasteland she was leaving behind. The ice stretched endlessly, beautiful and deadly. It had been her home, her teacher, her greatest challenge. But now she had a new challenge waiting. "I am ready," she said. The shuttle rose into the sky, leaving the Arctic behind. Below, Outpost Borealis grew smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny point of light against the white ice. Above, the stars were waiting. The journey to Kryveth took 3 weeks in human time. The Cathari vessel could travel faster than light through methods Alina did not fully understand. But even so, the distances between stars were vast. She spent the time studying everything the Cathari could tell her about their destination. The data was not encouraging. Kryveth was a world on the edge of its solar system, far from its pale sun. The average temperature was -70 degrees, with storms that could drop it even lower. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, though the cold made every breath painful. The terrain was mostly ice and frozen rock, with occasional volcanic vents that provided the only warmth. Previous colonization attempts lasted an average of 47 days before failure, Rishka explained during one briefing session. She had become the team's main point of contact with the Cathari. The Vexrii made it the longest at 62 days before their heating systems failed completely. "What happened to them?" Dr. Petrov asked. "They died, all of them. The cold killed them before rescue could arrive." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the stakes now. This was not a competition or a test in the normal sense. This was life and death. "Show us everything from previous attempts," Alina ordered. "Every success, every failure, every piece of data you have. We need to learn from their mistakes." Over the following days, the team studied the failures of other species. The Vexrii had relied too heavily on technology, bringing advanced heating systems that could not be repaired when they broke. The Thryn had tried to stay entirely indoors, never adapting to the external environment, and eventually went mad from confinement. The Cathari themselves had sent a small team once, decades ago, and they had lasted only 19 days before evacuating. "None of them thought like Arctic survivors," Marcus observed. "They all treated the cold as an enemy to be defeated, but you cannot defeat the cold. You can only learn to live with it." Alina nodded. "That is our advantage. We do not try to control our environment. We adapt to it." She began designing their settlement plan based on Arctic principles. Multiple redundant systems instead of single advanced ones. Regular outdoor expeditions to acclimate to conditions. Psychological support to prevent isolation madness. Every lesson from Outpost Borealis would be applied to Kryveth. The team drilled constantly during the voyage. They practiced putting on cold weather gear in total darkness. They rehearsed emergency procedures until everyone could perform them without thinking. They studied each other's roles so anyone could step in if someone was injured or killed. By the time the Cathari vessel reached Kryveth, they were as ready as they could possibly be. "This is it," Zylver said as they approached the planet. "Your destination." Alina looked through the viewing window at a world of white and gray. From orbit, Kriveth looked almost beautiful, its surface swirling with endless storms. But she knew what that beauty hid. Down there, the cold was waiting to test them. "How long do we have to survive?" she asked. "One standard year in assembly terms, approximately 400 of your Earth days." 400 days, longer than anyone had ever lasted on this world. Alina felt a flicker of doubt but pushed it away. Doubt was useless. Only action mattered now. "Then we better get started." The landing was rough. The shuttle bucked and shook as it descended through the violent atmosphere. Alina gripped her seat and watched the temperature readings drop lower and lower. -60, -70, -80. The numbers made even the Arctic seem warm by comparison. They touched down on a flat plain of ice that stretched to the horizon in every direction. The pale sun hung low in the sky, barely providing any light or warmth. Winds howled outside, carrying snow and ice crystals that scraped against the shuttle's hull. "Conditions are worse than projected," Rishkai reported from the shuttle's controls. "I recommend delaying your departure until the storm passes." "How long will that take?" Alina asked. "Unknown. Storms on Kriveth can last anywhere from hours to weeks." Alina looked at her team. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes, in the way they held themselves. But they were also determined. These were Arctic veterans who had faced death many times before. "We are not waiting," she decided. "If we wait for perfect conditions, we will wait forever. We need to establish shelter now, while we still have the shuttle's power to draw from. Captain, the risks are the same whether we wait or act. At least if we act, we control our fate." She stood and addressed her team. "Everyone suit up. We go outside in 10 minutes." The suits they wore were the most advanced ever created, combining Cathari materials with human designs. Multiple layers of insulation, powered heating elements, oxygen recyclers, built-in communication systems. Inside the suits, the team members were protected from the deadly cold. But even so, stepping outside felt like walking into death itself. The wind hit Alina immediately, nearly knocking her down despite the suit's stabilizers. The cold seeped through every tiny gap, searching for weakness. Her breath came in short gasps as her lungs tried to warm the frozen air before it reached them. "Everyone link up," she ordered through her radio. "No one gets separated. We move as a team." They connected themselves with cables and began walking toward the site they had chosen for their base. Each step was a battle against the wind. Each moment was a fight to keep moving forward. But they did keep moving. Step by step, meter by meter, they crossed the frozen plain. Behind them, the shuttle's lights grew dim in the swirling snow. Ahead, there was only darkness and ice. After an hour of walking, they reached a natural depression in the terrain. It was not much protection, but it would block some of the wind while they worked. "This is it," Alina shouted over her radio. "Start unpacking equipment. We need walls up before we lose the light." The team worked with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this exact scenario dozens of times during the voyage. Prefabricated wall sections went up first, creating a rough square. Heating units came next, pumping warmth into the enclosed space. Insulation was applied layer by layer, trapping heat inside. By the time the pale sun set, they had a basic shelter. It was crude compared to Outpost Borealis, but it was enough. Inside, the temperature rose to a survivable level. The team gathered around the heating units and shared their first meal on Kriveth. "Well," Marcus said, his voice tired but proud, "day 1 is done." "Only 399 to go," Dr. Petrov replied. Alina looked around at her exhausted team. They had just accomplished something no species had managed before, surviving their first day on the coldest inhabited world in the galaxy. It was only the beginning, but it was a beginning. "We made it this far," she said. "We will make it the rest of the way too." Outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind screamed and the snow fell and the temperature dropped even further into deadly territory. But inside the small human shelter, warmth and determination held the cold at bay. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, and they were not going to fail. The days on Kryveth blurred together into an endless routine of survival. The team worked constantly to expand and strengthen their shelter, knowing that any weakness could mean death. Walls were reinforced. Heating systems were backed up by secondary units. Storage areas were built to hold food and supplies. Alina enforced strict discipline but also made sure her people had time to rest and connect. She remembered how isolation could destroy even the strongest minds. Every evening, the team gathered for a shared meal where they talked about anything except work. They told stories about Earth, about families they had left behind, about dreams for the future. "I want to see the ocean when we get back," said Yuki Tanaka, a young engineer from the Japanese Arctic station. "I grew up near the coast, but I have not seen warm water in years." "I want to eat fresh fruit," added Marcus. "Real fruit, not the reconstituted stuff we get here. Apples, oranges, maybe a mango." These small dreams kept them human. In the face of the deadly cold, thoughts of warmth and comfort reminded them why they were fighting to survive. The Kethari observed from orbit, recording everything. Zylver was impressed by what he saw. The humans were not just surviving, they were building something permanent. "Look at this," he told Rishka during one observation session. "They have started growing plants inside their shelter, actual vegetation using artificial light." Rishka checked the data. The temperature inside their growing area is only 12 degrees above freezing. Most plant life cannot survive in such cold. They modified their crops. They selected varieties that tolerate cold and altered them further. Within 2 months, they will have fresh vegetables growing on a world where nothing has ever grown before. This was unprecedented. Previous colonization attempts had focused entirely on survival. The idea of creating comforts, of making life pleasant rather than just possible, had never occurred to other species. But the humans thought differently. They were not content with mere survival. They wanted to live. Month after month passed. The team expanded their shelter into a proper outpost, with separate areas for sleeping, working, eating, and recreation. They named it Borealis II in honor of the Arctic station they had left behind. There were setbacks, of course. A storm in the 3rd month damaged several wall sections, forcing the team to repair them in conditions that nearly killed 2 workers. A heating unit failed in month 5, and only quick thinking by Marcus prevented a catastrophic cascade failure. Dr. Petrov had to treat frostbite, hypothermia, and 1 case of altitude sickness despite the low terrain. But through every challenge, the humans persisted. By month 8, they had done something remarkable. They had built not just a shelter, but a home. The walls were decorated with photos and artwork. Music played in the common areas. A small library had formed from books people had brought as personal items. "They have stopped merely surviving," Zylver reported to his superiors in the Galactic Assembly. "They are thriving." This news caused a sensation among the Assembly members. Species that had watched their own attempts fail could not believe what they were seeing. Humans, from a primitive world, were succeeding where advanced civilizations had fallen. Delegations requested permission to visit. Zylver allowed it, bringing small groups down to witness the human settlement firsthand. "How do you do it?" asked a Thrin observer, her feathers ruffling against the cold inside the visitors' area. "How do you stay sane in such conditions?" Alina thought about the question carefully. "We do not try to control the cold, we accept it, we make peace with it. Once you stop fighting against nature and start working with it, survival becomes much easier." "But the isolation, the danger, how do you cope with the psychological stress?" "We cope together. No human survives alone. We share the burden and that makes it bearable." The Thrin observer left confused but impressed. Her species was highly individualistic, valuing personal strength above all. The idea of depending on others seemed weak to them, but the humans showed that cooperation was its own kind of strength. Other visitors came and went. Each one returned to their homeworlds with stories of the remarkable humans who were conquering Kryveth. The tales spread across the galaxy, changing how many species viewed Earth's inhabitants. Meanwhile, Alina and her team kept working. They knew the test was not over yet. 400 days was a long time, and anything could happen in the final stretch. The crisis came on day 352. A massive storm system developed suddenly, bigger, and more violent than anything they had experienced. The temperature dropped to -112 degrees, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds. The wind reached speeds that threatened to tear their shelter apart. "Everyone to the core section," Alina ordered. "Abandon the outer rings." The team rushed to comply, grabbing essential supplies as they retreated. Walls that had taken months to build were sacrificed to protect the vital center. Heating units were consolidated, focusing all power on keeping one area warm enough to survive. For 3 days the storm raged. The humans huddled together in their shrinking safe zone, rationing food and power. Outside, their carefully built outpost was being destroyed piece by piece. "We are not going to make it," whispered one team member, his voice cracking with fear. "Yes, we are," Alina said firmly. "We survived worse than this in the Arctic. We survived because we refused to give up. That is what we do now. We refuse." She moved through the crowded space, checking on each person, offering words of encouragement. Her own fear was overwhelming, but she did not let it show. A leader's job was to be strong when others could not. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. The team emerged from their core shelter to assess the damage. It was devastating. More than half of their outpost was gone, torn away by the wind. Supplies were scattered across the ice. Equipment was damaged or destroyed. Months of work had been erased in a few days. Dr. Petrov stood amid the wreckage, his old face lined with exhaustion. 48 days left in our test. Can we last that long with what we have? Alina surveyed the destruction. The rational part of her mind calculated their remaining resources and came up with a grim answer. They had enough food for maybe 30 days if they rationed strictly. Their heating capacity was reduced by 60%. Their shelter was barely adequate for half their team. By any logical measure, they should evacuate. The Cathari had emergency protocols in place for exactly this situation. A call for help would bring rescue within hours. But Alina looked at her team and saw something that defied logic. She saw people who were tired and scared but not defeated. She saw humans who had come too far to quit now. "We rebuild," she said. "We scavenge what we can from the wreckage and we rebuild. We made it this far. We are not stopping now." Marcus stepped up beside her. "The walls will be smaller this time, less comfortable, but if we focus everything on just survival, then we can make it," Alina finished. "Exactly. We strip away everything that is not essential and we focus on staying alive for 48 more days." The team mobilized with renewed purpose. What had seemed like hopeless destruction became a salvage operation. Wall sections that were damaged but not destroyed were collected. Equipment that still worked was gathered. Even bits of insulation torn from ruined structures were saved for reuse. Within 2 days, they had built a new shelter. It was tiny compared to what they had before, barely enough room for the 30 team members to sleep in shifts. The heating was minimal, keeping them alive but never comfortable. Food was rationed to the bare minimum needed to function. But they were alive, and they kept working. Zylver watched from orbit, amazed by what he was seeing. His sensors had told him the humans should have requested evacuation after the storm. Their resources were critically low. Their shelter was inadequate. By every measure the Cathari used, they should be preparing to fail. Instead, they were fighting harder than ever. "I do not understand," Rishka admitted. "Why do they not call for help? They must know we would come." "Because they do not want help," Zylver replied. "They want to succeed. They would rather die trying than live knowing they gave up." "That is irrational." "Perhaps, but it is also magnificent." The final days of the test were the hardest. The team was exhausted, cold, and hungry. Every morning they woke wondering if this would be the day their luck ran out. Every night they went to sleep grateful for one more day of survival. Alina spent the final week visiting each team member individually. She wanted them to know how proud she was, how grateful she was that they had trusted her to lead them through this. "You know," Marcus told her during one of these visits, "I never thought I would say this, but the Arctic seems warm compared to this place." Alina laughed. "I was thinking the same thing. When we get back, I am going to stand outside Borealis in the middle of a blizzard and enjoy how tropical it feels." "If we get back," Marcus corrected. "When?" Alina insisted. "We have made it 400 days on a world that killed everyone else. We are going home, Marcus, all of us." On the morning of day 400, the team gathered in their cramped shelter for the last time. Outside, another storm was building, as if Kriveth was making one final attempt to break them. But inside, the mood was celebratory. "We did it," Alina announced. 400 days, longer than anyone else has ever survived on this world, longer than the Galactic Assembly thought possible. Cheers erupted, echoing off the thin walls. People hugged each other, some crying with relief. The weight of a year of constant danger lifted from their shoulders. Within hours, a Cathari shuttle descended through the storm to collect them. Zylver was waiting at the landing site, his compound eyes reflecting an emotion that might have been admiration. "You have accomplished something remarkable," he said as Alina boarded the shuttle. "The Assembly will be discussing this for generations." "We just did what humans do," Alina replied. "We survived." The journey back to Earth took another 3 weeks. This time, the mood on the vessel was different. The team was no longer nervous newcomers venturing into the unknown. They were returning heroes who had proven humanity's worth to the galaxy. News of their success had spread across countless worlds. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive were reconsidering. The Galactic Assembly had already voted to extend an invitation. Humanity was being welcomed into a community that stretched across the stars. When the shuttle finally descended toward Outpost Borealis, Alina looked down at the Arctic ice she had missed so much. It looked beautiful to her now, this frozen wasteland that had taught her everything she needed to know about survival. The other diplomats and officials were waiting on the surface, their breath making clouds in the cold air. But Alina barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on the ice, the snow, the endless white that had been her first home. The shuttle touched down and the doors opened. Cold air rushed in, familiar and welcoming. Alina stepped out onto the ice and took a deep breath of Arctic air. It felt like coming home. Behind her, Marcus emerged with the rest of the team. They were thinner than when they had left, worn by months of hardship. But they walked with their heads high, knowing they had done something no humans had ever done before. "Captain Volkov," said one of the officials, stepping forward, "on behalf of all humanity, welcome back. You have achieved something incredible." Alina smiled slightly. "We just refused to give up, that is all." But she knew it was more than that. They had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. They had proven that endurance and determination could overcome any obstacle. They had turned frost into fortress, surviving the cold by embracing it rather than fighting it. And now, because of what they had done, humanity had a place among the stars. That night, Alina stood alone at the observation window of Outpost Borealis. The sun had set, plunging the Arctic into darkness. But the sky above was clear, and stars scattered across it like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there, countless worlds were waiting to be explored. Countless challenges were waiting to be faced. Humanity would meet them all with the same stubborn determination that had carried them through the Arctic and Kryveth. The cold pressed against the window, trying as always to get inside, but Alina did not feel afraid of it anymore. The cold had been her teacher. It had shown her what humans could achieve when they refused to accept defeat. Now they would take that lesson to the stars. And wherever they went, whatever they faced, they would survive. Because that was what humans did. The end was really just a beginning.